Let me take you back to a blisteringly hot Thursday afternoon. One of those days where the air practically vibrates and you can feel the sun judging you for even existing. I was in the middle of my backyard, drenched in sweat, halfway through stacking the 12th limestone block when I heard it. "Excuse me! Excuse me!" The shrill voice sliced through the air like a lawnmower through wildflowers. I paused, looked over my shoulder, and there she was, arms crossed, sunglasses that looked like they were stolen from a 1980s action movie, lips curled into a snarl. Karen, the neighborhood HOA president, self-appointed, self-righteous, and self-absorbed. "You can't just build a pyramid in your backyard!" she shrieked, storming up to the edge of my property line like a chihuahua guarding Buckingham Palace. I wiped my forehead, leaned on my chisel, and looked her dead in the eye. Why not? That was when I knew things were about to get legendary. Now, before you assume I'm crazy, let me explain. I wasn't building just any pyramid. This wasn't some novelty lawn ornament or a quirky art project. No, sir. This was a scale model tribute to the Great Pyramid of Giza, built with actual limestone bricks, hand-measured geometry, and celestial alignment. It was my passion project, my legacy, my ancient dream reimagined in modern suburbia. And Karen, she was the Sphinx guarding mediocrity with a clipboard. "This is against HOA regulations," she snapped. "It's a visual obstruction, a potential hazard, and I'm pretty sure it violates the Residential Land Use Code of Section 4, Paragraph B." I smiled. "Did you read Paragraph C?" She blinked. "There's no Paragraph C." "There is if you read it in the original Egyptian." Her jaw fell open just slightly. She didn't get the joke. That's when I realized she wasn't just annoyed, she was intimidated. This wasn't about a pyramid. This was about control. And I had just done something no suburban homeowner is ever supposed to do. I broke the mold. I dared to create something extraordinary in a world obsessed with uniformity. And now, Karen was coming for me. By the next morning, I had a citation posted on my mailbox. Unauthorized structural development. Fine. $4,750. That's right. They tried to fine me $5,000 for stacking rocks in the shape of one of the greatest wonders of the ancient world. And I hadn't even added the capstone yet. But I wasn't backing down. Oh no. I wasn't just going to beat this fine. I was going to make history. You see, what Karen didn't realize was that I had done my homework. I wasn't just a backyard builder. I was an Egyptology nerd with a law degree and a stubborn streak. I'd studied ancient construction, sacred geometry, the alignment of stars, and more importantly, the obscure and fascinating intersection between international cultural preservation law and local municipal codes. Yes, my friend, there's a loophole the size of the Nile. And I was about to sail right through it. But first, let's rewind for a moment. Why a pyramid? Why now? I'd always been obsessed with them. As a kid, I watched every documentary I could find. I devoured books on pharaohs, tombs, hidden chambers. I even built miniature models out of sugar cubes and glued them to cardboard like some ancient pastry architect. The precision, the mystery, the sheer audacity of stacking over 2 million stones without modern technology, it spoke to me. It whispered a question every time I looked at those golden silhouettes rising against desert skies. What legacy will you leave behind? Fast forward to adulthood. I'm working a job that feels like slow death in a cubicle. I go home to a house that looks like every other house in the neighborhood. Rows of beige conformity. It was like someone pressed copy and paste a key across the entire subdivision, and I snapped. That's when I got the idea. If ancient civilizations could express their genius through stone and sweat, why couldn't I? Why couldn't I build something real, something symbolic, something that says, I was here? Not in likes, not in hashtags, but in limestone. So I started researching, measuring, planning. Every stone I laid had meaning. Every angle was intentional. I wasn't just building a structure. I was honoring a civilization, reclaiming the artistry of creation. But all Karen saw was a problem. The day after the citation arrived, she showed up again. This time with a tape measure, a pamphlet, and 2 other HOA board members, Gary, who always wore Crocs, and Linda, whose smile looked like it hurt to maintain. "Under Section 9, this is considered an illegal monument," she announced. "If you don't dismantle it within 10 days, we will escalate this." I didn't say a word. I just turned around, walked inside, and came back holding a large folder. "What's that?" Karen asked. I flipped it open. "This is your lesson in ancient Egyptian law and international cultural statutes. You might want to take notes." Gary's mouth fell open. Linda blinked like she was waiting for a buffering icon to disappear. I was about to take this battle out of the HOA playbook and into a whole different arena, one filled with UNESCO articles, cultural heritage exceptions, and a declaration filed under the Backyard Historical Preservation Act of 1996 that, with the right framing, could be legally interpreted to allow for the construction of a culturally significant replica structure on private property under certain conditions. You see, when you build a pyramid, you're not just stacking stones, you're reviving a legacy, and that's what they underestimated. So what happened next? Let's just say Karen wasn't ready for what I was about to drop on her. This wasn't just about bricks, it was about defiance, about vision, about showing that even in a sea of gray stucco and vinyl siding, one person can still raise a monument to imagination, and not only survive the storm, but become legend. Karen had crossed the line, not just figuratively, but literally, into my yard, clipboard in hand, like she was on some archaeological raid. Only, instead of seeking treasure, she was out to destroy it. I could see the gears turning behind her oversized sunglasses. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was about making an example of me. Unfortunately for her, I came prepared. While most people were binge-watching dating shows and complaining about gas prices, I was poring over international treaties, zoning loopholes, and something I like to call the Pharaoh Clause. Now, to be fair, it's not officially called that, but buried in a dusty appendix of the UNESCO 1970 Convention on the means of prohibiting the illicit import, export, and transfer of ownership of cultural property. Yes, that's a real thing. There's a section that mentions cultural replicas used for preservation, education, or public engagement on private property. And guess what? That includes scale reconstructions, if they're not for profit, and if they follow respectful guidelines. I wasn't selling tickets. I wasn't turning it into a BB. I was honoring Egypt's architectural brilliance in my own backyard, block by block. But try explaining that to Karen. So I went one better. I brought backup. 2 days after the citation, I held a press conference. Well, not a press conference exactly, more like a neighborhood barbecue that just so happened to include my old college friend, Dr. Omar Al-Said, a visiting professor of Egyptology from Cairo University. He wore his academic robes, brought replica artifacts, and gave a passionate talk on the symbolism of pyramids and their preservation across the globe. I handed out flyers titled, "Pyramids, Sacred Geometry, or HOA Menace." Kids ran around with paper pharaoh hats. Parents sipped lemonade. And Karen? She stood at the edge, seething, trying to keep her fury from boiling over as Omar explained how even small-scale reconstructions carry educational and cultural value, which should be protected under Article 5 of International Preservation Law. I could see the storm in her eyes. The next morning, she doubled down, filed a formal complaint with the city, claimed I was conducting unauthorized public events, hosting unlicensed educators, and operating an illegal open-air museum. But here's the kicker. When the city inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, he found a quiet yard, a partially completed limestone pyramid, and a handwritten sign that said, "Private project, in honor of the builders of Giza, not open to public viewing." And beside that, a thick binder I had labeled, "Legal Justification for Pyramid Construction, Property of My Name." He flipped through it. Glossary, footnotes, zoning code references, annotated maps. A legal argument so airtight it could survive the sands of time. He looked at me, shrugged, and said, "You might actually be within your rights." Karen lost her mind. She started sending anonymous letters to other neighbors, warned them I was bringing down property values. One day, I found a plastic Anubis on my doorstep with a note. "This belongs in a museum, not next door. Nice try, Karen. Wrong mythology. Try Indiana Jones next time." But then came the real showdown. She called an emergency HOA meeting, 7 p.m. sharp, community center. The room was packed. Lawn chairs squeaked. A pot of stale coffee steamed in the back. Karen stood up front with a slideshow labeled, "Pyramid Problems, a Threat to the Subdivision." Her first slide, a zoomed-in photo of my pyramid at an unflattering angle. Her second, a graph showing emotional discomfort levels in the neighborhood. No citation, just a bar labeled Karen 10 and everyone else 0. When it was my turn, I brought out the big guns. A printed statement from Dr. Omar, a notarized letter from a cultural preservation nonprofit, and then I dropped the hammer. I've submitted an application to the National Register of Backyard Cultural Projects. It's a niche list, but fully recognized under state law. And if approved, my pyramid becomes a protected historical tribute. Dead silence. Someone coughed. Karen's eye twitched. I wasn't bluffing either. There actually is a Heritage Project recognition form that, with enough signatures and backing, can grant symbolic status to private constructions that meet cultural criteria. And now the tide had turned. Neighbors started whispering. One guy even leaned over and said, "So, could we do a coliseum next?" Karen stood up, slammed her laptop shut, and declared, "This is not over." But in many ways, it already was. She tried one last move, reported me to the county zoning board for violating the decorative structure height limit. But the inspector, the same guy who'd once been to Egypt on his honeymoon, came by, admired the craftsmanship, and said, "You're still under the limit, and honestly, this is kinda awesome." That was the moment I knew I had won. Not just the battle, but the narrative. The HOA's complaint had become a community conversation. The pyramid wasn't a threat. It was a curiosity, a landmark, a statement. Sure, it still wasn't finished. The top block was missing. The inscriptions weren't etched yet, but the foundation was solid, and not just in stone. It was built on vision, on defiance, on the belief that even in the most ordinary places, you can build something extraordinary if you're bold enough to try. But wait, you want to know how it really ended? How the pyramid became more than just a monument, and what happened when Karen tried to destroy it once and for all. If you thought Karen was going to back off after the HOA meeting, you've clearly never met a woman who once filed a noise complaint because someone sneezed during her Zoom call. No, Karen was just getting started. 3 days after the HOA vote failed to get my pyramid removed, I woke up to the sound of rumbling. I ran to the window, rubbed the sleep from my eyes, and there it was. A backhoe, on my lawn, engine revving, shovel poised, operated by a man in an orange vest, nervously glancing at a clipboard and saying, "I'm just following orders." Karen was standing beside him, barking instructions like she was reenacting the demolition of the Berlin Wall. "Start with the western edge, then flatten the capstones. That'll make it unstable, and the rest will collapse on its own." I bolted outside in my bathrobe, heart racing, adrenaline pumping. "Stop, you can't do this," she smirked. "I got an emergency municipal order. You didn't file the correct construction forms. This is now a non-compliant structure. I'm within my rights to remove it." I raised an eyebrow. "You forged a demolition order, didn't you?" She didn't answer. But I didn't need her to. I turned to the driver. "Do you really want to be the guy who bulldozes a scale model of the Great Pyramid without verified legal clearance?" The backhoe's engine sputtered off. The driver looked visibly shaken. I'm gonna call my supervisor." But it didn't matter, because at that exact moment, cue divine intervention, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Out stepped a reporter from Channel 7 News, followed by a cameraman, a boom mic operator, and the type of person who carries a clipboard and a lawsuit in the same backpack. Yes, I called the media. Because if you're going to defend your pyramid, do it on live television. The reporter walked up, microphone in hand. "Is it true your HOA is attempting to destroy a culturally symbolic structure on private land without legal permission?" Karen turned pale. I don't think we're on record. Who gave you permission to film?" I stepped in, holding a folder with all the documents. Proof of historical significance. emails from Egyptologists, the legal clause protecting educational replicas. "This is more than a pyramid," I said into the camera. "It's about standing up for creativity in a world that fears it. This isn't just stone, it's story." And Karen tried to bulldoze it. And just like that, the internet did what the internet does best. Within hours, the story went viral. Pyramid Justice at Let Him Build / Karen vs. Khufu. By sunset, I was being called the Suburban Pharaoh. People started showing up to see the now famous pyramid. Some left offerings, miniature camels, little scarabs, even one guy who brought an urn of sand from Cairo and sprinkled it around the base to bless the project. Meanwhile, Karen? Well, she wasn't quite ready to let the power go. She tried one more maneuver, filed an injunction to halt further construction pending a mental wellness evaluation of the builder. Yes, she tried to label me unstable for constructing a perfectly aligned, culturally rooted structure out of stone. My response? I submitted a psychological evaluation from a licensed therapist stating, "Builder demonstrates high-functioning creativity, above-average intellect, and a healthy sense of humor, diagnosed with nothing but a bold vision." Mike dropped. Eventually, the county stepped in. Officially, they reviewed the case, all of it. The documents, the footage, the intent, the public interest, the legality. Final decision: Karen's demolition order was null and void. Not only was the pyramid allowed to stand, but because of the national attention, it was now eligible for cultural grant funding as part of a historical appreciation initiative. Irony? The very thing Karen tried to bury me with had turned into a beacon of freedom. And it got better. I received a letter from the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities. Not a cease and desist like Karen hoped, but a thank you. They wrote, "We are pleased to see the beauty and legacy of our ancient monuments appreciated and shared. May your pyramid stand as a reminder that true heritage knows no borders." I framed that letter, hung it in my garage, right next to my trowel and spirit level. Karen, on the other hand, resigned from the HOA to focus on her personal health. Rumor has it she moved to a condo, somewhere with strict architectural conformity. Poor lady never did appreciate geometry. As for the pyramid, I finished it. Every brick in place, aligned with the stars. The capstone gleamed gold. Okay, it was painted, but it looked gold. I even installed subtle lighting that made it glow under the moonlight. Visitors came from nearby cities. Teachers brought students. Bloggers wrote about it. I gave guided tours, by appointment only, of course. And once in a while, I'd stand at the top of the stone steps and gaze out across the rooftops, knowing I had carved out a little piece of immortality in a world that begged us all to stay forgettable. This wasn't just about fighting Karen. It was about fighting small thinking, fear, control, beige expectations. Because in every block I laid, I felt the voice of every rebel, artist, builder, and dreamer who ever dared to shape stone into legacy. And in the end, I didn't just build a pyramid, I built a legend.